I'm not in the game, but I get very competitive, and then I'm really just not thinking about what I'm saying. And I mean, it's taken a while to get there. It's taken years of doing the scouting academy and doing all of these courses, but I really am so confident on what I don't speak on things I don't really know that much about. And again, I feel like that's something I find myself having to disclaim a lot of the time, probably unnecessarily, but I'm not an offense person. So when people ask me questions about quarterbacks, Michael Pratt, I can only say so much. I speak to who they are as guys and how they compete, but I understand defenses a lot much more intricately than I do offense. And so I speak a lot more intricately on those things on air as well. But yeah, I've been, again, very lucky that I haven't felt like I've really needed to censor myself on air. But yeah, I mean, just whenever you say things, it's always going to take a different meaning, like you said. And there were guys speaking out about the Deshaun Watson stuff, and they did not catch half the flack that a single woman that said, a word about it did. And it doesn't really, I think that was just a very unhinged group of people, to be honest with you, that like followed along that whole saga that I don't think are that indicative of a general fan base. It was just a really ugly time to be on Twitter. And, I also do think it's worth mentioning that as Twitter has kind of become a little more of the wild, wild west in terms of there not being that much rhyme or reason and being able to mute or follow along with people. The one good thing I almost will say is it does feel like we've all kind of stepped back from Twitter in a way where we all joke about it being X now, but there does feel like there's a little bit of a separation, and that might just be me. But I've just found it a lot more easier in the last couple of years or so. And maybe, again, that's just credibility, and I'm just correlating a lot of things here. But I found myself thinking a lot less about what I say as the years go on. And I just think that just speaks to experience and gaining some thick skin.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked a little bit about social media in that aspect. I go a lot into that in the episode I'm writing right now, just in talking. Cause I mean, like I said, in Iowa, I mean, I kind of just, it was like, I mean, I noticed this initially when I was in Colorado during COVID, or government reporter, it was like, he could just say, oh, the governor issued this mandate. And it was like, everybody decided to blame the reporter for reporting the reporting, or like I myself just like, hey, we had this UNI game, here you go. And it was like, everybody was just angry because it wasn't done the way that they're used to it getting done. And it's like, people say, oh, it would tell me, again, going back to that well-meaning thing, people I know, not in my industry, just friends of mine that work in office jobs and stuff, they say, oh, well, why don't you just ignore it? Why don't you just turn it off? Why don't you just not listen to it? And I'm like, well, it's not exactly that simple. I guess in terms of, to the people who say, oh, just ignore the haters, or just and I know you've talked a little bit about, like, sometimes you do have to learn when to pick battles. You do have to learn when to press block and mute, even though, conversation for another day, there's been rumors that they might get rid of the block feature on X, which, I don't think they're going to end up doing that, but yeah. I guess if you could just talk to me about why it isn't just so simple as, just don't listen to it, just don't pay attention.
Well, sure. And I mean, even with the block, someone can just make another account and do the same thing if they want to. Again, it's just being a public figure, I guess, for lack of a better term, you do have to kind of bear the brunt of that. And yeah, you can't unread something. So when people say just to ignore things, I mean, I do genuinely recommend setting up things like filters where all of my unknown requests, if I don't follow someone, they go into a box where if I'm not, in a good place, I'm not even going to just open that and even bother to see what's really going on there. And I'll kind of save that. And again, it's usually a lot of the time not that bad, but you do just kind of brace yourself because, like you said, once you open something, yeah, I can get over it eventually, but you can't unread things that are said to you. And I mean, I just remember growing up when the internet started, and less so social media, but it was, again, just a very untethered situation where I remember there was something called Forbes Spring, which was the stupidest idea ever. It was like an anonymous comment page that we all signed up for. And no kidding, the responses were awful. I remember I went and found it on like an archived thing a few years ago. And I was just like, what were any of us thinking, like allowing people to put anonymous, unfiltered thoughts in there? But it's easier said than done, especially, I came into this industry when I was 26, 27, and I'd gone through a lot in my personal life at that point to where I was just very, burnt out, which almost was a blessing because I just couldn't find it within me to care about a lot of things that, I think would have gotten to me, especially if I was younger, just coming out of college. And really just didn't have that much life experience yet. And so I do think, again, it is easier said than done. And that's when you just have to physically put your phone down and walk away sometimes is just the best way. I personally have gotten really into meditating and exercise. I just think finding ways to keep your brain in a healthy way is something that you just have to be really careful of in this industry, especially if you're like me and you thrive on schedule. And then when that goes down, then a lot of things kind of start to spiral. So I just think keeping yourself really as kind of in the best mindset that you can be in is unfortunately the best advice I could give, other than, make yourself a private account, but you can't really do that and make it that far in this industry, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And, I know you mentioned just in terms of